Hello and welcome to Comicstorian. In today's video, I want to talk about the ending of Loki Season 2, explain what exactly happened, who this brand new character is, and I also want to talk about things like the ramifications on the MCU. But today's episode is brought to you by Henson Shaving. Today's episode is sponsored by Henson Shaving. Are you tired of subscription razors or getting nicks and cuts from cheap razors? Well, that's why you gotta meet Henson Shaving. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that is bringing their precision engineering to your shaving experience. Henson Shaving makes affordable razors with standard dual-edge blades to give you that old-school shave, but with the benefits of new-school tech. Once you own a Henson razor, it's only about $3 to $5 per year to replace the blades. Henson razors have a great design with incredible durability, and they give you a super nice clean shave. It's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/complete-story to pick the razor for you and use the code complete-story and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just make sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/complete-story and use the code complete-story. So let's kick it off. What happened in Loki Season 2? The season itself was kind of long and drawn out in a way that I truly enjoy, very much having an over-the-top kind of like visually appealing and orchestrated kind of way of drawing it out. To me, that's the kind of thing I like. But what actually happened? In Loki Season 2, basically we picked up where Season 1 left off. He Who Remains was killed. Upon his death, the sacred timeline branched off and became multiple timelines, basically creating the multiverse. Season 2 picks up with them trying to figure out what He Who Remains meant. Other variants of He Who Remains are going to be arriving, potentially Kang variants, as we know, in the Kang Council from Quantum Mania. But that's not the only thing he warned us about. Now there are sprawling multiple timelines, which we don't know what's going on. The season begins with hunting down Sylvie to figure out exactly what's happening and what she did, while also trying to stop the remnants of the original TVA from destroying the branching timelines. What we ultimately discover is that the branching timelines are creating a problem for the Loom. The Loom, if you don't remember, is the device that holds all of the multiverses in check. It keeps it all in one path for the most part. The issue turns into, by having multiple branching paths and multiple timelines, the Loom can't keep them all contained. Ultimately, the Loom is going to be destroyed, and at its destruction, the entire universe is destroyed. That leads us to the second half of the season, in which Loki is now using his time-slipping power? It's kind of a power, but he learns how to eventually control that power. So our god of mischief and lies turns into more of a god of time. He's able to move into any point in his own timeline, ultimately affecting or changing things ultimately. This leads to about 2 episodes of him trying to figure things out after the destruction of the Loom. The first thing that he does is he moves around through the timeline, gathering all the people that he knows from the TVA. Mobius, B-15, Sylvie, OB, all the different characters. They're all brought back to try and reassemble the TVA. What he ultimately discovers, though, is that he's not bringing them together to save the day. These aren't individuals that have any idea what is going on or how to fix it. He's ultimately bringing them all together because he wants that. He wants his friends there. He's gone from being this loner god of mischief, guy who wants to conquer Asgard, to someone who's begun to appreciate friendships and the people around him and how we can all work together to achieve a common goal. He then goes through the timeline multiple times trying to figure out how he can fix this, because once he realizes that he's just trying to reassemble the TVA, that's when he gets a grasp on his powers and can manually go through his own timeline. This allows him to go through, and he begins to come up with almost a comical sense of multiple versions to try and prevent the end of the universe. We then go through a series of that, one of which he ends up spending centuries learning how to actually do like physics and theoretical and all that other stuff. And he eventually discovers that there is no way to stop the Loom from breaking. That when they finally come up with an answer, they quickly realize that the multiverse is making an infinite number of multiverses. There is no max number. In the terms of comics, that's how come we have numbers like 6, 1, 5, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's because there are multiple multiverses being created. It's too much for the Loom to handle. He comes to the realization that the only way to stop that from actually happening would be to prevent the death of He Who Remains, prevent the multiverse from being created at the beginning. He jumps back in time to that exact moment, trying to stop Sylvie to explain to her that by killing He Who Remains, he's going to create a problem that will explode. After what we find out is 1,000 attempts at stopping Sylvie, we discover what's actually going on. This is all a plot from He Who Remains. He knew this was going to happen. He orchestrated it all in the beginning, and he knew what his death would bring, but he also knows how to travel through time and adjust things, stop time, and do whatever he wants to do. He tells Loki that Loki is left with a decision, the same decision that we were left with in season 1. He can either kill Sylvie, which will allow He Who Remains to live, and then Loki can basically rule over the sacred timeline with He Who Remains. It's not directly said, but it's kind of implied that's the answer there. Or he can let Sylvie kill He Who Remains and kill everything. The ultimate choice comes down to Loki deciding, is it better to be living under a predetermined life and have no free will, or is it better to be dead? Just straight dead. Now, this is a little different than what we had in Season 1, because at the end of Season 1, that was the options brought to our heroes. Although they didn't realize they were going to die, they were still left with the decision of, do we give ourselves free will and let whatever comes next happen? At the time, we assumed that would be various Kang variants. Or do we live under the thumb of He Who Remains with a predetermined life? In the end of Season 1, Loki didn't have the option. That option was taken away from him by Sylvie making the option. Now we have Loki, god of mischief, practically god of time, with the decision and more power than Sylvie had to make that decision. And he also understands the ramifications. The threat isn't the Kang variants. The threat is, by killing He Who Remains, all timelines will end. Is free will worth more than death? Is what we are now presented with as the option at the end of Season 2. Loki goes back to Sylvie, has a chat with her, and she tells him no. Death is better than having no free will. So he begins to decide what he's going to do. And what he ultimately comes down to is a third option. I'm going to tell you how this relates to the comic books in a moment, but he comes to a third option. No one's going to tell him how to live his life. No one's going to tell him a predetermined path, and he's not going to destroy the multiverse. He's going to make something new. So now that he's pretty much God-level, time-powered person, he just walks out onto the Loom's deck and destroys the Loom. All of his friends are panicking. They're all wondering what's going to happen because Loki isn't unraveling. We then watch as all of the timelines and the branches explode outward and slowly begin to die off. But Loki then begins to grab them and revitalize them with what appears to be magic. He then continually grabs each and every branch, powering them up, slinging them over his shoulder like a cape. He then drags all of these potential branches up to a throne in the middle, the throne at the end of time. The throne that He Who Remains commented to Loki, the guy who sits on the throne, the big chair at the end, gets to make the decisions. Loki takes that seat, holding all of the timelines, and he empowers them all. And then we see it spin sideways, and we get the appearance of Yggdrasil from Norse lore, which is the story of trees, the story of life. At this point, they don't outright say it, but Loki has become the god of stories. And I'm going to tell you how that relates to his comic book history in a moment. But he lives there now, alone, watching his friends have free will. He has sacrificed his free will and his life to allow everyone that he knows to live freely, and for all of the timelines to exist, and for the multiverse to live in a better state. Not under the thumb of one man of a Kang variant, but instead under the thumb of Loki watching it and just sitting there watching the stories. How does this relate to his comic book history? Before Secret Wars, we had a storyline known as Loki, Agent of Asgard. In an Agent of Asgard, Loki was attempting to become a hero. But all of his lies and all of his mischief overall were causing him multiple problems, and it was kind of a comical situation, but he was never able to break out of Loki, God of Mischief. In this storyline, Loki sees all the inevitabilities of his life. From King Loki, this evil tyrant king who finally rules Asgard, to someone who's trying to kill Thor, to Kid Loki from the Young Avengers era. He sees everything in front of him, and he sees that no matter what he does, he is not going to be able to break out of this predetermined life that he has been given. He will go from Kid Loki on the Young Avengers to King Loki, this evil god who's going to cause problems and potentially kill Thor. But this middle ground Loki, this Loki trying to become a hero to fix things, well, let me read to you what the wiki actually says so I don't mess up the wording on this. Loki goes into a metaphorical space where old Loki and Kid Loki are both at. He tells them that he will not be able to change his story. Another character that I'm not going to go into for the sake of this video, Verity, calls him out, telling Loki that because King Loki did not recognize her, an alternate future is already unfolding. Loki decides that he can change his destiny, realizing that lies are just stories, and that he is the god of stories, not lies. So he decides he's going to tell a new story. Does that not sound like Loki Season 2's finale? In this storyline, Loki then destroys himself, which causes the problem for King Loki, and it's a whole different thing. They go in a different direction. But in our Loki Season 2, Loki just admits that he's the god of stories and takes the seat, picking a new path, not one ruled by He Who Remains or ruled by a destroying itself timeline. In the comic book world, Loki survives everything that he did, shows back up, and declares that he is the god of stories. Then we moved into Secret Wars, which was a pseudo-reboot, not reboot moment within Marvel Comics. When we came back from Secret Wars, every superhero had a brand new, fresh #1 with a new direction, and the god of stories gets referenced a couple of times, but basically in normal comic book lore, it's pushed away because the writer who created the god of stories storyline is no longer there. So the new people writing Loki wanted to do new stuff with Loki. This brings us to the conclusion of Loki Season 2 and where we are now. What are the ramifications on the MCU, though, you're asking? Well, it doesn't appear to be that many. The multiverse still remains, although now it seems to be watched over by Loki, god of stories. The only real remnant that I can tell that is coming out of this appears to be the TVA now being more aware of the Kang variants. They even reference loosely the one that battled in Quantum Mania. There's also rumors that Wolverine and Deadpool are going to be battling against Kang variants in Deadpool #3, and that the TVA is going to be involved. So that could be the only real major lasting ramification. What's going to happen to Loki? Well, honestly, in my opinion, nothing. This is where he's going to die and end. He's going to be forever over there. The best thing that we can hope for, in my opinion, is in Secret Wars or in Kang Dynasty. There's a moment where Loki, god of stories, comes out and sees Thor, and they have a 2-second reunion, so we at least get that last button on the Loki storyline concluding everything. If you're going to bring Chris Hemsworth back for a quick cameo, which the rumors are stating, then I would hope you're going to bring back Tom Hiddleston to play Loki so that they can have that last thing where Thor sees that his brother's alive and his brother became the god of stories. But that's where we are. That is the ending of Loki 2 explained. And I loved this. I'm going to make a separate video discussing how much I enjoyed it and what my opinions were, but I hope you guys enjoyed this explanation. If you want more things like this, let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget, we cover comic book content on a daily basis, and I'll see you there.